Hello, welcome to our discussion of logging in Java. This time we're going to be using the standard library that Java provides for logging. And this is based on a tutorial found at Vogela here for full credit here. So we have this file. This tutorial lays out my HTML formatter, mylogger, and useLogger. We'll go through each one of these classes and see how they're used. Right here in main, we instantiate an object of our own type, so useLogger is instantiated. That's so we can call tester.do something in log. This is actually the generation of the log file. It's actually what happens after the log is set up. So mylogger.setup, which is a static method in mylogger, is called first. So let's take a look at that. And that's where the action happens. So the standard Java library for logging is set up to be flexible, so you can customize it. And this is where this setup method shows how the logger is customized. So it's a standard Java library, but it can be customized to your needs. And we've customized it in two or three ways here. So this program is set up. It throws the IO exception. So the first thing we call is logger.getLogger. This is important to understand. So this is a factory method. So factory methods are static methods. You can tell because it's the name of the class. It's the name of the class and then dot the name of the method. That's a static method. Also, Eclipse puts static methods in italic. So factory methods also return an instance of a class which they are a part. So factory methods are used in a place of a constructor when you want to control the creation and use of objects. So constructors can be called from anywhere. But if you want to gain control as the class designer of the constructor, you can make your default constructor private and then provide factory methods. Now, factory methods will allow the control of object creation. In this case, this global logger name is kind of a fallback position. It's just a constant that says global. Every time you pass the same string to getLogger, this factory method is engineered to return the same object every time. This means that you can use the same logger scattered throughout your code without creating one and passing it as a parameter everywhere to all your classes and all your methods. You just use the same consistent name for the logger, and the factory method will return the same object. So we'll see the call to getLogger in other classes here, in other methods. But if it calls logger.globalLoggerName, then that means it's getting the same object everywhere and using the factory method to do it. So the factory method must be maintaining a table of logger methods logger objects that it has created. So you pass it a different string, it's a new string to it, it'll create a new logger for you and remember it. So the next time that string is passed, the same object can be passed to you. Okay. So the first thing this does is suppress the logging to the output. So this is the default behavior for the logger, is to simply write to the console window. So this actually asks for the base logger. There's a logging hierarchy here that we're not going to get into in this discussion, but there's a hierarchy of loggers, and the hierarchy at the top is the logger that's named by the empty string. So we get its handlers, and then we remove the handler, so we won't see output to the console. If you comment out these codes here from line 36 to 40, then you'll start to see logging information come from the console window as well. Okay. Then we set the filter level. So there's different logging levels, and those logging levels are important. If you're debugging a problem, you might want full information. I went to function A, I went to function B, I went to function C. I leave those functions. Breadcrumbs everywhere in order to diagnose a hard problem. But you don't want those breadcrumbs to be normally run in production, because writing to a file is one of the slowest activities a computer program can do. So if you're filling up a log file with tons of information, it may be useful information when you need it, but it's going to slow your program down. So you want to be able to switch it on and off. You switch logging so when you filter on the info level, that means every log entry that's marked as an info level will go through and logs of a higher importance. Now, normally even info level is too low for for a production release, and you'd want to set this to severe or warning, so you only see logs of actual error methods, not logging the like I'm here, breadcrumb type information. Okay, so this is set to a fairly low level. The info level is not the lowest level possible, but it's a fairly low level. So we're going to get a lot of output here when we run it. Okay, so the file handler is a class in the logging package. That's what's used next here. So it is the output target for the logger. We're going to have two output files here that are created. The one for the text, a plain text file, and one for an HTML file. Now, there's a weakness here. This is not industrial strength. Because the names are a constant of the log files, every time this program runs, the previous log file is erased. So you don't typically want that to happen. But if you add it, for example, just as a suggestion, if you add a date time stamp to the file name, a new file can be created when the program starts, because if you get, let's say, the date plus the time down to the milliseconds, you're guaranteed to have a unique file name, and the file name will be created, and you'll get successive file names that have date timestamps on them, and you can sort order them in the File Explorer and go to the let's say the log file where the error on the date and time where the error occurred within that time. So this is a suggestion for further enhancement here. So we create a text formatter. And that's going to be a plain text file. Simple formatter is in the logging package, so we're just creating an instance of an object that we've already imported via the logging package, and it's just a simple text file. It's the plainest a log can possibly be. So we set the formatter we set the formatter here to be the file text here. And then we add the handler of the file text here. So the formatter is set into this file handler, and then the handler is added to the logger. So every handler that you add to the logger would be a different logging target with its own format and its own file name. So here's the HTML one. Here we create, so simple formatter is a class that's created in the logging, notice in the logging namespace. But this, my text formatter here, is coming from source.com.logger, our namespace, or our package name, my text formatter. So that's an instance of an HTML class. That's an instance of a class. It's a formatter class, but it will create an HTML file, and we'll look at the details of that following this. So then we do the same thing. We have a file output target that also takes a formatter. Say I want to write to this file in this format, and then we add a handler here. So we've removed the the console handler, and we've added two other handlers. So we'll have two output targets that are forming here. Next, we'll look at what happens in my HTML formatter. So let's look how my HTML formatter works. So this is important. My HTML formatter extends formatter. Well, where does formatter come from? It's part of the logging. It's part of the logging package. So when we extend it, now we're going to override these methods. The tutorial author did not use the override decoration here on these methods. I added it to emphasize what's happening. So imagine you're the logging you're the logging logic. You want to open the file, and then you say, what's the head piece of the file, right? Format that. So call getHead, and that writes the initial that writes the very first initial log entry. It could be something like, I'm a log created at this time and date, right? In the HTML format, we write the HTML code necessary to open up an HTML file, the top piece of an HTML file. Then what happens? I've been called to write an output. I've been called to write an output entry, right? To format an output entry. So it calls format. What do you want to format? You could have very plain. Just take the text. Just takes the text string. Like the text writer must just practically do nothing to the output string. Here we take the output string here, the log record, and we wrap it in HTML code because we're wrapping it. So this method would be called once getHead. This format will be called every time the log entry is written. Then at the very last, when the program is closing down, we want to close out the file. But before we close out the file, we write something to say close out the file, and that's what getTail does. So we take advantage of polymorphism. The logger is written and coded to say, open the file, call getHead. Oh, I have an entry, call getFormatter. The log file is being closed. Now call getTail, and we use polymorphism to make sure our custom handlers are called. And that setup, remember, was created back in our setup program where we instantiate the myHTML formatter object. We set it in to the file handler for that, and then we add the handler to the logger. So now we're wired to format and create HTML entries for our logger. So that's what setup does, and that in turn creates a myHTML formatter object. And now it's ready to be used, and we call tester.doSomething and log, and that's right here to test our log entry. So now we demo logger. We set the level to severe here, so we're modifying the severe. But remember, we have the very same logger object that setup used, because without passing it around, we use the same logger name for it. So that factory method getLogger is going to return the same object to us. So we reset the severe level, and then we write some severe entries. That's basically saying severe entry only. So warnings will be filtered out. Info will be filtered out. Finance will be filtered out. Anything less than severe will be filtered out. And this would be a typical way that you'd set up a log file when the program woke up in normal production mode. It's only when you're starting to debug that you'd want to switch these flags, and this would be a soft setting. You'd want to be able to express it from the outside, say, tell this program to lower your log levels, right, to give more information out. Then we set the log level to info, and now this is going to allow more warnings to come, more information to come through, because we've lowered the level, we've lowered the criteria. Severe will come out because it's higher than info. Warning will come out, and of course info will come out, but finest will not come out in that case, and that's what we should see when we run this program. So I run this program, and like I said, every time this program runs, you can see logging.html and info and logging.text.html. That's where they'll be created. If you don't see them when you run these programs, you need to hit refresh on your tree, and it'll refresh the look of it. Let's look at logging.txt. Okay, so here's our log entries, and we saw basically two groups, the severe group, and then when it was set to info group, and there's their tags. I want to say something about this timestamp. I'd organize it differently, because you want to be able to sort on these timestamps in sorted order. You want to put year first, then month, then day, and you wouldn't want to use human abbreviations either, all numbers, 2020, 04, whatever the number is for June, 07 or 06, and then and put it in that order so you can filter on them. Right. This time date stamp is more for human readers, but you really don't want to do that. You might want to put your log file, for example, through an automated program that shows you what happened on a particular date and maybe even a particular time area. So you want to be a computer program really to be able to, you want to put them in an Excel spreadsheet, and you want to be able to use an Excel formula on it. You want that time date stamp to be easily understood and interpreted by a computer program, not necessarily be friendly for a human reader. So that is all the use of and customization of the standard Java library logging methods. Very important topic. Logging is vital to the support of production programs.